Order. Before we proceed, I would like to make some comments about the logistical arrangements. The use of audio control. To enable a member to talk, push the talk button on the microphone speaker unit fitted on the desk. Members speaking need not to move to a microphone. The system is strong enough to pick up sound from your located seat. Members seated in the close proximity of the speaker must therefore be aware that any loud conversation may interfere with the recording of the speaker's speech. Interpreting language selection. In order to select your language of choice, please press the channel button on your desk. The system operates as follows. For Afrikaans to English, select channel 2. For isiXhosa to English, select channel 6. Right side of unit control, volume control. I wish to thank members for their understanding and cooperation. The Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Commission 1, report Youth and Economic Empowerment, Poverty Alleviation.
I now recognize Honorable Bukamaso Molulela.
Greetings to the House. My name is Bokamoso Mulale, and I'm a medical student at UCT. I'm representing the Commission of Economic Empowerment, Youth Economic Empowerment. Chair, first of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to address the House on this important issue. Just to tell you more about myself, Chair, I am a medical student, as I've mentioned. I'm also involved in the world of business, as I sit on the board of 2 small companies, one by the name of Campus Medical Supply, and the other one is named HN Innovate. Therefore, as a South African entrepreneur, I know the challenges that young entrepreneurs face in this country. I'm sure that we all know that the country's population consists of about 37%, which is the youth. I believe that if this youth is empowered, more especially economically, we'll be able to be in a position where we're able to make the impact which we're expected to make. We have the potential as the youth of eradicating poverty in South Africa, provided that we are aided in overcoming challenges and given the opportunity to become active participants of our economy. There are a few policies in place, ladies and gentlemen, and these policies have been discussed in our commission today. And as a commission, we've been able to identify issues as well as come up with recommendations. But what makes us stand out from other meetings which have been held in the past is that the recommendations which we have suggested and are going to put to the table are ones which are practical and also measurable. Therefore, Chair, we request that enough attention be given to the speakers who are going to follow as they make these very important recommendations. I thank you.
Cool.
Honorable Speaker, I will address the problem and thereafter a recommendation. It is true that South African youth represent a powerful resource for the country, but they have to be encouraged to be active members of the society. The first challenge is the inadequate access to information with regard to entrepreneurship programs and positive networks that promote this. Youth and the unemployed are often not informed about the structures and programs that are available to them. When I say entrepreneurship, I mean startup businesses. A recommendation that our Commission has considered is that government should start using social media more and reaching out to rural communities. Infrastructure for such services like internet should be provided and programs should be developed to educate people on how to use these facilities. We all know that on MTN, Twitter is free. We would like the government to create free apps with regard to infrastructure so we can promote Wi-Fi and internet access in these rural areas. My second problem at hand, NGOs are not coordinated to sufficiently support communities seeking economic opportunities. Our recommendation, the relevant government should provide communities with information related to NGOs and other organizations that could specifically assist communities with small business entrepreneurship programs. The Department of Economic Development and Tourism should consider to hold a symposium with the relevant NGOs to find out how to coordinate their efforts better and how to be more visible and accessible to communities. We stress, don't wait, create.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before the third speaker, I would like to make this announcement. Please note that the report for Commission 1 is being printed as soon as available to made available to everyone. Before anyone talk, I must first recognize you, then before you can talk. The third speaker is Honorable Zinhle Mbaliswana.
I'm honored to be here. I'm Zinhle Mbaliswana. It is unclear to the youth what government plans and policies are with regard to the youth and economic empowerment. What adds to this problem? What has been progress of previous youth parliament recommendation in this regard? Our recommendation, government should find better ways and more workable solutions to clear, communicate and interest with the communities in this regard so that they can be assisted and empowered. Thank you.
I now recognize Honorable Jazil Wentzel.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. My name is Jazriel Wenzel is my surname. Thank you. I'm all the way from the heart of the Karoo, Beaufort West. So I'm gonna be touching based on our fourth challenge and also give through the recommendation. Our fourth challenge as a commission were entrepreneurship issues relating to starting a small business are raised and brought to the attention of relevant government officials, but no action follows, resulting into people becoming despondent. Through you, Chair, if I can just quickly share an experience I had in registering my business. Actually, now I'm at the second registering point. First time I went through CEDA, and then the official said I must give the money to her. She's gonna pay in for the name reservation, and afterwards give also 200 and something, I think. Long story short, the CEDA official were fired because of funds that she must use of a lot of young people that wanted to register their businesses in that time. So the only solution CEDA offered at that stage were to re-register because they said there was nothing else they could do. And then at the moment, we're currently busy still in the registration process through some other person, but you know, these days, there's so many scams, Honorable. So we actually, at this point where we feel that with our brilliant ideas that we have, and we're not employed at the moment, we don't have the necessary funds to register our own businesses. Since like myself, a lot of others, they took bread money, electricity money to establish a business in order to establish a legacy, were robbed. So we have that challenge of not having the money to register our business, although we have viable and brilliant business ideas. Also, there's no monitoring and support when businesses are ultimately registered and established. And a recommendation to this is that a central help desk with a database to track issues raised and to monitor progress when asking government for assistance, as well as learnerships and internships programs should be monitored and their curricula should be revised. 2.5, Honorable, is the last point that I'm asked to address. The challenge we have is investment opportunities are lacking in areas that requires unskilled labor. The information sector represents an opportunity for the less fortunate and unemployed, and the Department of Economic Development and Tourism should provide support to this sector. Our recommendation is access to finances in the form of micro-lending should be encouraged by the department. And another last point before I step down, Honorable Chairperson, through you, is we should start looking for the answers on the street by normal and ordinary citizens instead of the so-called suit and tie carriers, because the answers is not only there, but it's also on the streets by the normal citizens. I thank you.
Thank you. Honourable members, before we proceed, we would like to welcome Honourable Mr. R. Mackenzie, the member of Provincial Parliament. Will you please rise? I wish to recognize speaker number 5, Honourable Yonela Msongelwa.
Thank you, Speaker. As the speaker has already indicated, my name is Yonela Msongelwa. I am coming to represent the Commission 1 on youth economic empowerment and poverty alleviation. Our problem statement said that career guidance in schools are lacking, especially when learners have to choose specific subjects in grade 10. And our recommendation is that career guidance should be started as early for learners to be informed about which subjects to choose from. And we have therefore said that, therefore elaborate on saying that career guidance must be starting exactly at grade 4, also to try and match the maturity age of children, so that if they are able to understand what they are being taught, that a workplace sort of exposure must be created for children. As such, government must create a campaign, whether it's a take a child to work kind of campaign, so that citizens of the province can also be motivated to try and contribute to this factor. Also, that in addition to that, exhibitions and expos must be created in order to sort of support this particular recommendation that they've made. And 2.7, we've already said that limited representation, the youth parliament itself must sit much more regularly. It must not be a once-off thing in order to be able to maintain oversight in some of these youth matters and youth-related matters. As a result, we've said when this youth parliament sit, there must be a district representation in it. That's one. Two, that relevant stakeholders and organizations must therefore be part of it. I also think that it should not necessarily be recognized as a political sort of parliament, as the ordinary parliament, but serve almost like a commission of this nature, where it serves to make recommendations, address outcries in the sense of saying, if the youth are saying this thing that we've recommended has not been done, then we can advise the official sort of provincial and national parliament in those regards. With those words, we thank you and God bless you all.
Thanks. I wish to recognize the Honorable Apiwe Mtum.
Greetings to you, Speaker. And also greetings to the House at large in various capacities. Here I will speak about the infrastructure, the wasting of resources, and also the maintenance of our various communities. For example, infrastructure is allocated in places where it's not needed. When I'm saying in places where it's not needed, I want to make a living example. For example, there's this controversial Muizenberg police station that is about to be built that costs approximately close to R1 billion. For example, crime rates there are less reported when you compare it to Inyanga, where the crime rate is high. So how can it be that that so-called close to R1 billion police station is built where crime reports are less reported than in Nyanga? Is it because people are less educated, so they do not know what is what is actually what is actually meant for them and what they are supposed to be allocated to? And also want to speak about the maintenance of roads. You will see less potholes in suburbs, in northern suburbs in Constantia, and then you'll see many potholes in Kailicha. What's happening? Why is government not intervening in that matter? And also, I want the provincial parliament to tell people that they are given a chance to participate to publicly participate in sessions or in committees in national parliament and provincial parliament, where the allocation of infrastructure and the allocation of funds in various committees are discussed, so that they can know how these things work and the process that are in place for it. Thank you.
To close the debate for Commission 1, I wish to recognize Honorable Molule.
Chair, thank you once again for this privilege and opportunity. Chair, please allow me to mention that I strongly believe that the adoption of these recommendations will benefit South Africa's youth. Chair, I want to stress that economic empowerment not only improves our economy and inspires economic growth, but also conserves the human dignity of those who benefit, as this is a constitutional right. Chair, I also strongly emphasize point number 2.1, with regards to access to information, I believe that it is a constitutional right that people be allowed to have access to information. Therefore, the only way in which the youth can become empowered is if they are informed on what is happening around them. In most cases, there are events which are planned and discussed for youth to benefit from, but our people are still unable to benefit because they lack information. This fundamental principle is important for us to consider, because without information, all is in vain. Chair, please also allow me to stress the point, I think it's point number 2. Let me just look for it on the sheet. Okay, it's here. It's point number, okay, well, it says that the government should clarify their policies and plans with regards to economic empowerment. We need to be in a state where we are aware of what the plans and policies in place are. There are plans, the NYDP, the NYP 2020, the Youth Empowerment Framework, which are also in place. But once again, our people still lack clarity, they still lack information. Chair, with regards to the last point that was discussed, I want to ask if it is possible that our people be involved in decision making, as once again, this is a constitutional right. They should be involved when decisions are made about expenditure of the House. We should be careful of wasteful expenditure and make sure that all the resources that the Parliament has access to benefit our people. With this being said, I therefore submit these resolutions for submission. I thank you.
Thanks. That concludes the debate on this report. Are there any objections on the report of Commission 1 being adopted? No objections, agreed to. The Secretary will read the second order of the day.
Debate on Commission 1 report. It's Commission 2, Commission 2 report, Youth and Social Cohesion.
I therefore recognize Honorable Makama.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you also, fellow delegates. The topic that was discussed by our Commission was youth and social cohesion. One of the first tasks that we tackled was defining social cohesion in different social, political, and economic sectors. Social cohesion was defined in agreement as the inclusivity of youth in the local community, understanding the role of the individual in the collective and the inclusion of the disabled community in society at large. The points that are about to be raised by our Commission are a representation of the various social, political, geographical, and economic individuals in the Western Cape. We ask that, Chair, as we hear the challenges and recommendations to follow, that we keep in mind that cohesion is the act of unification. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Honorable Vavi.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to you and the entire House at large. I'm just going to touch based on the key challenges or observations that in our group or stated. The first one was the fact that there's so many, there's so much the cohesion between the youth is the fact that there's too much difference, and we did quote that there's so much, we're living not just here in the Western Cape, but to look at the country at large and almost the whole world at large, is that we live in a very selective world whereby there's not a lot of inclusion. People are being selected as being who has the potential and who has not. So in recommendations to that, we would prefer or would like as the group that if the province would be highly inclusive in terms of invest into each and every person, regardless of what's their skill and what's their specialty, but just having a skill, for instance, leadership, investing on people's leadership skills, we believe that it is a very crucial step that we should take. Make sure that we invest in each and every person's leadership skill, whether you're going to be a doctor, whether you're going to be a politician or whatsoever, but do acquire the skill of self-leadership. I thank you.
Thank you. Member. I wish to recognize Honorable Wells or Wells.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Good afternoon, fellow delegates. I'd first like to take this moment to thank my entire Commission for the hard work that we all put into drafting this resolution. And we wish I had more time because we had so much more to say. What I'd like to first talk about is just elaborate more on what is social cohesion. A community or society is cohesive when inequalities, exclusions, and disparities based on ethnicity, gender, class, nationality, age, disability, or other distinctions which engender divisions, distrust, conflict among society is reduced or eliminated. But in our Commission, we went further in this simple definition. We define social cohesion as a community coming together to combat the social, political, and economic ills in our community. We also touched on the concept of Ubuntu, that one person cannot be a person without the existence of another, and that our success as an individual is based on the success of the individuals in our community. But not only does cohesion work within our communities, it relates between communities as well. How does one community relate to another community? How does the rural areas relate to the urban centers? And how does a province relate to another province? We identified the two biggest challenges which prevented effective social cohesion in our society. The most prominent is our past, our exclusionary, violent past, which perpetuates itself today through racism, patriarchy, homophobia, and ableism. And the fundamental issue to bringing about a socially cohesive society is through improving the socioeconomic conditions of our people. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Mfutwana.
Greetings to the Chair and the members of the House. Basically, what I will touch base is on the roles of youth in building a society with all the share and common sense of the social identity. The youth do not want violence. Violence should not be a solution in youth problems. The youth in rural areas feel neglected by the government. There is no social inclusiveness in rural areas. Youth should find their own identity first before they can hear and make a change. The youth should promote a spirit of togetherness and benefit from each other's abilities. If I know something, I should be able to be helped by the second person. The youth should promote a spirit of togetherness and benefit from each other's abilities. In some areas, the challenge is that youth are expected to pay for the facilities that is being provided by the government. I thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Fordo.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is Nongosu speaking, Fordo. I am from a very small community called Vrygrond, which is based in the Muizenberg, a community that is one of the historical disadvantaged communities in the Western Cape. Chair, I'll also be speaking of youth and cohesion. I would want to unpack the topic in saying that the topic is identifying the problem and challenges that our youth of today is confronted with, without repeating what is condemned in the topic. I am understanding to be addressing the issue of how can the youth, with all this baggage work, hand in glove with society in addressing the very root cause of all these problems, and that is poverty. Having understood the problem, the youth and society in general should thrive to be solution-driven rather than over-elaborating the problem. It is my view that the municipality, as the closest sphere of government to the people, should put resources in place for youth development in different aspects. Because the future of any nation is determined by what is invested in the young generation. Because those are your future leaders, be it in business, be it in government, or in society. It's an investment for the nation and not in a favor. How many of our youth of today understood the concept of cooperatives, collective ownership of the means of production to ensure broad-basing empowerment and equitable distribution and ownership of our country resources and eradicate the capital monopoly system that enrich individuals? In that, Chair, I'll be closing to say, youth of South Africa, can we please organize ourselves into skills and leadership and involve ourselves in community leadership as well in order for us to grow and to grow our country and to grow our metros. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Solomons.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Greetings to you, Honorable Speaker, as well as members of this House. In my commission, from my fellow delegates, we have discussed certain challenges and itself the definition of social cohesion. I would touch on the recommendations that we discussed in our commission, and the first one will be the youth should equip and develop themselves with leadership skills, build youth participation in youth programs in communities. We need to educate the youth and local government officials about the Constitution and the need for this report to be relevant to youth. Also, we need to increase safety in our communities and visible policing. Collaborate with other countries to fight the scourge of sexual abuse and violence against women and children. As you know, recently we have heard horrifying stories about our youth being mugged, raped, human trafficking, etc. Also, we as the youth need to have our own voice in this political sphere and not follow the voice of political parties as we need to. And also to encourage the youth to participate in community development forums to ensure that the voice of the youth is equally represented. Another aspect would be the provincial government should spend more money in integrating communities, integrating transport for persons living with disabilities, as well as mental health illnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Klassen.
Thank you. Good day, everybody. I will be talking about our projects and programs introduced by government to enhance social inclusion accessible to all youth. The government has established programs specific for the youth, but the problem is always funding. There's not enough money to sustain the project. The government structures are in place in our communities. However, there is a challenge of communication breakdown between government and the youth. Violence is always a problem for the youth in various communities because as the youth, if we see a fight breaking loose, we nosy, we want to go watch, and that makes us not able to get information such as education, etc. The government should make use of youth people in addressing challenges faced by the youth because you can't take a 50-year-old person to come and explain to a youth, example, 16-year-old, on what she's facing because there won't be a relationship between them. She won't understand what I, as a 16-year-old, would go through. The government should strengthen the monitoring and evaluation systems for the youth-funded projects because it's not, we're just giving money, but we're not knowing where it goes to. Like the grants, it goes to the children, but do we actually check if the children gets it? No, we don't. That's all for today. Thank you.
Order. I now recognize Honorable Mashia.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I will be addressing the key observations and/or challenges that our Commission has recognized. Social cohesion means community inclusiveness and finding solutions on youth's challenges such as gangsterism, substance abuse, and teenage pregnancies. Social cohesion means understanding yourself and the community that you live in. Communities should work together in finding solutions for challenges faced by the youth. Example, access to resources, education, access to sanitary pads, in the case where condoms are actually free in our country, but what about sanitary pads? Challenges faced by the youth include, amongst other things, rape and students being mugged or murdered by criminals. Social cohesion also includes people living with disabilities, ensuring that their needs and emotional states are taken care of. Cohesion means unity and diversity. People with previous backgrounds reside far from the cities and they feel neglected. That's why the government should ensure that these facilities actually go to the people who are unable to meet those far distances in order to receive these resources provided by governments. The social injustices of our past had played a big role in not promoting social cohesion. The youth is facing many challenges, such as drug abuse, human trafficking, high unemployment amongst the youth, and the youth feels like the government is doing nothing in resolving these problems. The youth knows that the challenges faced by the youth the youth knows what the youth is facing in the day and age that we live in. What needs to happen is for the youth to come together and come up with solutions instead of always identifying what is wrong in our communities. With that being said, I thank you.
And now I want to recognize Honorable Makama to close off the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Our Commission has focused on building an understanding of cohesion. We focused on building a cohesive model that has fair youth representation in order for youth issues such as substance abuse, gangsterism, and gender-based violence to be heard by government institutions. We need youth to lead the debate and the adaptation of these resolutions. We can't just talk about it and then just go away. We need to have youth involvement in these, in these types of debate, and also in writing any legislature and processes, because like my fellow colleague said, the youth know what the youth are going through. Youth involvement in local government structures needs to be rectified. There needs to be fair representation and a fair amount of youth within local government, starting at local government and moving on up, who represent our youth. We recognize that violence in communities, lack of monitoring and evaluation, and the lack of youth involvement are serious challenges that any government programs that are initiated in communities, especially in the Western Cape, faces. I close with this metaphor. One of my colleagues said, we as the youth are bricks, and government is the bricklayer. If the bricklayer chooses only to use the good bricks, and he's building a house, and this house is meant for everybody, and this house is supposed to represent everybody, but the government is but the bricklayer chooses only to use the good bricks, is that house a fair representation? Thank you.
Order. That concludes the debate on this report. Are there any objections on this report, on the report of Commission 2 being adopted? Honorable Klaas.
Thank you, Chairperson. With your permission, Chairperson, if I may be allowed to add on the recommendation. It is in line with, what I'm adding is in line with exactly what has been outlined in the recommendation of this commission. Shall I continue?
Yeah.
Chapter in this commission, it is said chapter 2, which is the Bill of Rights of this country, is talking about equality, and it goes on to further explain that In 2012, the Department of Arts and Culture hosted a social cohesion summit and adopted a social cohesion national building strategy framework which talks to address the legacy of colonialism. We have a situation, Chairperson, where if a public servant goes out and say things that are against this act, this section of the Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights, this House, which is the provincial legislature, cannot do anything to that person simply because of the proportional representation that we have in this country. It's only political parties that can deal with them, but this House cannot do anything. Case in point, we've got a premier of this province whom went and acknowledged the contribution of colonialism in this country, having an understanding that says, we come from a very dark past and we cannot allow people to promote speeches that are dividing the people of this country. I move to submit that we propose as young people of this province.
Honorable Member, try
Yes.
not to make a speech, but to make your recommendations.
Thank you, I will do that, Chairperson. I propose that we include a clause in the Constitution as young people and submit that we empower our legislative houses to deal with public servants whom are working against the spirit of social cohesion in this country.
Thanks.
I thank you.
Order. Are there any objections on that recommendation from Commission 2?
There are no objections.
Cool. There be no objections. The report is therefore agreed to. The Secretary will read the third order of the day.
Skills development and access to education.
Cool. I now recognize Honorable Goldberg.
Thank you, Speaker, members of this House. The purpose of this report is to give an introduction and a background on the challenges that our youth face with regards to skills and education development and the access to education. As we all know, our hashtags and the background with regards to the struggles we face, I will propose to you this report be adopted, and I will also like to request that this House grant my fellow speakers the opportunity to provide in-depth responses, solutions, and suggestions to this House. Thank you.
I now recognize Honorable Nzuzo.
Thank you, Speaker. I extend my greetings to each and every member of this House. As the Commission on Youth and Education, Skills and Development, as well as access to education, we have identified certain key observations and challenges, of which will be highlighted, and thereafter we'll focus on the recommendations thereof. One of the first things that we had identified was the inequalities between schooling systems that has been realized by the discrepancies in the resource allocation across public schoolings. And we feel that there should be a needs-based approach to ensure that schools are allocated appropriate resources. Resources, for example, would be computers, as well as labs, as we had seen that in different parts of the Western Cape or in different sectors, different schools are allocated different resources. We also have identified that the Public Schools Act needs to be revisited, and there needs to be an implementation of measures to administer means tests, and this should be considered to ensure that parents who cannot afford to pay education and their kids are afforded the same opportunities. It is also of utmost importance that we realize that the funding programs for schools also needs to be revisited. Schools of different quintile levels should not be measured by the same criteria. This means that fee-paying and non-fee-paying schools should have different needs and should be assessed accordingly. It is also important that we realize that education also includes early childhood development. This is basically the critical stage in a learner or child's life where they are being developed critically and where they develop skills to analyze. And we have seen that the returns of the lack of investment in early childhood development sort of results in the failure rates or the difficulty of students in the lower foundation phase of school as well as high school with regards to reading skills, etc. And we also feel like the approach to using uniform assessment does not consider the varying skills levels that learners and educators face. I will now hand over to the next speaker.
Cool. I now recognize Honorable Chiliza.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Greetings, honorable members. I'll now continue with the challenges and our key observations. So some of our key observations were that we recognize that there's a maladministration in terms of spending practices for basic education. So this is with regards to resource allocations, books, lack of computer labs in various schooling. So we found that that needs to be rectified. Secondly, we recognize that there's a separation between public and private schools and this is a key factor contributing towards the many disparities and inequalities. So as you may know, within the Western Cape, there are various schools that are public. However, due to being former Model C schools, they have more access to better resources, better quality education. So we really want to decrease the disparity between those schools and ensure that schools, even within townships, are afforded the same opportunities and resources. Also, we would like the government to allocate teachers who are qualified in the field of ICT to learners and to not have teachers who are not specialists. So we know that there is this situation, there is a situation in certain schools, especially schools in townships, whereby there's teachers who teach, let's say, English or Afrikaans, who are also teaching computer, and they're not necessarily qualified to teach those subjects. So what we're asking is that the province ensures that schools are properly qualified to teach the various courses. There is also a concern that learners in Central Karoo are not given further development in school sports. So we do need to recognize that we should not neglect people who are not in the central cities or CBD areas, that other schools should be allocated the same resources, especially when it comes to sports, culture, and computer resources. Areas outside of the metro should be captivated to have independent structures so that school resources need not to be supplied from a centralized point. The government needs to implement action to address the concerns of the education center in the context of the country's economic junk status, as we do know that economics plays a huge role in what happens in terms of fiscal policy, in terms of resource allocation. So we need to bear in mind the current economic situation that we are faced with. Lastly, the government needs to implement action to address the concerns of the education sector. Lastly, many learners attend schools in areas far away from where they live. This is a result of parents preferring learners to attend schools in other areas due to the lack of resources within the local communities. So as I previously mentioned, we should make sure that schools within townships and wherever the student resides, that they are properly resourced, that they are functioning properly, so that they can learn in an area of their choice which is close by. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Henry.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly. There is a reason why I bring this up. Due to my cerebral palsy, my body tends to move away from the microphone, so my apologies in advance. Much like my colleagues or honorable members who spoke on education, I agree with some of the concerns being raised, but my chief focus is on integration of persons with disability. So much so that I do not believe that we should have special schools as it were in the 1980s when I was born. I believe a child with a disability should have the right and freedom. There's a very important meaning as to why I say freedom to attend that exact same neighborhood school, so that integration into the community is seemed easier, and then we do not have to use the words paradigm shift so often. My solution to this is parents who are unemployed but have basic literacy and want to finish their own education should come to school during the day and offer to assist a student with a disability, be it allowed to write in a book or read to that student. It would still keep the student on the same level as his able-bodied counterparts. All that will happen during exam time is the student will have to sign a declaration of authenticity. I'm not sure whether in my lifetime this integration will take place, but I do welcome a proper approach to integration somewhat sooner than rather later. I hope this is not too out of order. I thank the House.
I now recognize Honorable Mukai.
Greetings to the House at large. I rise on the Commission of Youth and Education. As we know, it is no secret that the underperformance in high schools and tertiary schools is a direct result of early child development. With that being said, I'd like to draw the House's attention to the following challenges: 2.1, 2.7, 2.10, and 2.18 respectively. The government needs to task itself with fairly allocating resources, especially in underprivileged schools. It cannot be that a student who does not have access to a computer from primary into their high school career is expected to reach tertiary level and compete against students who have had access to these facilities. Furthermore, the government needs to allocate resources. In allocating resources, the government needs to task itself with tackling maladministration of resources. It cannot be that resources are used for personal greed, whereas we actually have students who are in need of these very resources. Lastly, it is no secret that the doors of higher education remain inaccessible for poor and missing middle students. The private sector needs to be held accountable and put to task to provide funding opportunities the same way that affirmative action is utilized to benefit these very corporations. In funding sectors such as arts and culture, government needs to look into providing funding for such students. Lastly, NSFAS enslaves students to their debt, therefore highlighting the importance of funding opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Bosman.
Greetings, members in the House. I will further take this memorandum from 2.19. It is difficult for learners who reside in rural areas to gain access to Premier Pay program. The Central Karoo only has the TVET colleges, namely the South Cape, and it offers limited subject, which is government need to put more emphasis on putting institutions of higher learning like tertiary, like to develop the university that already exist in the Northern part of the country, like in the Central Karoo. There is no student accommodation in Central Karoo for learners from outer towns, meaning that government has to put more efforts on that, building accommodation for students who exist in that part of the country. There is no recruitment drive or open days facilitating by TVET colleges. Grabo is also a town when you pass the mountain. In Strand is the first town that you get over that mountain. It only has a school that accommodates children with disabilities. Only has one school that accommodates children with disability from the age of 5 to 15 years. Therefore, these learners have to be accommodated in areas distant from their original settlement. I'll furthermore get into the recommendation ever since I'm one of the last speakers of this program. So, a recommendation. The Commission has recommended that the Western Cape Department of Education and DSD should work together to assist in equipping early childhood development. And early child development is one of the primary source of bringing the best out of a child whenever he's grown up. Because if it's been developed from the early childhood, meaning that the future is very bright, the Western Cape Department should allocate local educators to areas to which they are familiar with. The Western Cape should also work with the private sector to implement incentive-driven corporate investment in township schools, meaning that private sector should put more hand in the educational sector, especially on the childhood development sector, which is much more needed in our country. There should be more programs focusing on career guidance at school, which is sometimes students in high schools, whenever they finish their matric, they have no idea of how are they going to, from where are they going to of which field are they going to take after they have finished their matric, which is, they are not career-wise equipped. Yeah, there should be, the Western Cape Education Department and Department of Social Development need to work together to allocate more psychologists and counselors to schools for learners. As we know in our country that there are more violence in our schools. If I'm not mistaken, last year there was a child who was stabbed in the stomach in Niger, and the internal organs fell out of the stomach and he died. So I think that department need to have a permanent position that will be stationed inside the school so that children who are having those kind of issues can be attended. Early childhood development centers teachers need to be equipped to identify learners' strengths and weaknesses. That will create an environment that will be much better for everyone who will be dealing on a later stage with the kids. And they themselves will be able to conduct their own lives ever since they will be getting advices of what should they do and they don't. And my last point, which I will hand over to the last speaker of our program, recommend the overhaul community college system by allowing adults to assist learners with visual disabilities to write during classroom sessions. Thank you.
I now recognize Honorable Mayalo.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I welcome the sentiment by the latter speaker that spoke very much. No, thanks. The definition of education, honorable members, is a guiding mainstream of schools today that education is the delivery of the knowledge, skills, and information from teachers to learners. While the above metaphor state education is a delivery system sounds reasonable, right? It misses what the most important of education, student outcome measured by the test or exams, bear little relationship to the true education of what education means. We're living in a society whereby we call South Africa as a rainbow nation, but can we really call South Africa as a rainbow nation whereby we have your example for your Joseph High School, whereby you have 100% of black learners, and whereby you have your Windsor High School, you will be having 90% of white learners. Can we call that a nation of a rainbow nation, or is this just a color cloud? More importantly, education includes early childhood development, which is, as we grow as learners, you will find that I will relate to black townships whereby you have early childhood Department of Education and Social Development equally are not taking this part seriously, because you will find that there's the early childhood development is in the backyard. It's not taken seriously. Learners, toddlers will just come and sleep, and that's all. There's no education primers that is provided to them. But part of this thing, we also have an example whereby learners don't have resources, especially in the rural areas, where that's a reality whereby they don't know how to use a computer. But the education department focuses only on metro schools. That's how it becomes a reality. Most of the recommendation that is provided, we say tertiary institutions should have satellite offices in rural areas, such as your Overberg region, Central Karoo region, Cape Winelands region, so on and on. The Western Cape Education and the Department of Higher Education Training review the state of efficiency for the South Cape College in the Beaufort West, Central Karoo, and establishment of 2 more colleges for the remaining municipality areas in the Central Karoo. Provide appropriate student accommodation for the South Cape College. The national government shall consider building satellite campuses linked to tertiary institutions in the township and rural areas. The Western Cape government to build the Miyazoma Apile Combined School that was earmarked to be built and still have not built. We are still living in a reality that most of Western Cape schools in the rural areas, such as you'll get your Strand, you'll get your Overstrand district, whereby they're having still plastic schools. The Western Cape Education Department should introduce subjects such as poetry, arts, drama, and writing in grade 9. Today's education in Western Cape has become just prior to teaching and going out of school. We are forgetting that not all learners are smart. We have forgotten that we need sporting activities at school. We need such and such of activities. We are living in a reality that the private sector shall be involved in this thing, in this goal. Because private sector has not been contributing everything. I mean, how many learners are buying Colgate every month? What is Colgate company providing to the learners of Western Cape? How much are they putting toward the education system? Do they only interested in us when they are about to make money or not? Just to close by, I'm closing on a quote, close my sentiments, not closing the commission speech. To close by on a quote by Marxism theory, in order for the new to be born, the old must die. The education shall go recruit new teachers, fresh teachers, not all people that are there just to earn a salary, just to sit on the backseat, but involve new teachers that are important in the dynamic of providing free quality education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now wish to recognize Honourable Goldberg to close the debate.
Thank you once again, Speaker, for the opportunity to address this House and yourself. I trust that this House, including the officials present, noted the sentiments, the recommendations, the challenges that we face in one of what I call the most important sectors of a community and the country as a whole. We, as the Commission, would therefore propose that the officials government sector, private sector, and all stakeholders involved as recognized in this report be obligated to action the recommendations and address the challenges that we have identified, as we trust that it would be for the better, not only for the Western Cape, but for the education crisis we are currently facing at a national level, so that we can compete with our neighboring countries and effectively educate our citizens of this country. I thank you.
That concludes the debate on this report. Are there any objections for the report of Commission 3 being adopted? No objections, agreed to. And that concludes the business of the day for the House's agenda. Members are requested to remain seated for the final announcement.
I would like just to send a thank you to our speaker, who brought the proceedings of this plenary to a very wonderful conclusion. Before I make some closing remarks, just to acknowledge amongst ourselves is a member of the Provincial Parliament, Member Ricardo McKenzie, who's seated in this bay here. Member Ricardo McKenzie is the chairperson of the Petitions Committee of our Provincial Parliament. You are most welcome, sir. I think the proceedings for today have run quite well, and we have to thank you as the members of the Provincial Youth Parliament for that. Your conduct throughout, both in the commissions as well as here in the plenary, have been quite remarkable. The quality of the debates, the quality of the reports, the recommendations that have come out of here are of a very high quality. A round of applause to yourselves. Now, these reports with the recommendations, now that they have been adopted, approved by the Youth Parliament, the three reports will now be put together by the administration. The officials that have been assisting us throughout the day, in the commissions as well as here, it will be put together, consolidated into one report of Youth Parliament 2017, Western Cape. This report will be presented to the Speaker, which I have no doubt the Speaker will request that it be formally tabled. And tabling in our language means it will be published in the ATC, and ATC is a formal publication of the Provincial Parliament, containing announcements, contains tablings, meaning laying items on the table. It contains committee reports. So this report of the Youth Parliament will be laid for members of the Provincial Parliament to know that this has been the outcome of the Youth Parliament deliberations for the past day. So it will be a formal report consolidated into one. I think in addition to tabling, which is a formal process, the Speaker will also direct that the report as a submission be referred to identified committees of the Provincial Parliament. You got a range of issues that have been traversed in this report. So they will most definitely be referred not to only one committee, but to a range of committees that exist. Definitely education, definitely social development, definitely economic development as a committee, so that in those particular provincial committees, the issues can be followed up through the oversight activity of our provincial committees. So basically what it means is that they will become part of the agenda of the committees to be able to take them forward. And as part of taking that forward, the normal way that committees work is that they will also call upon the relevant government departments in tabling these particular issues, so that the government departments can respond to those issues that pertain to them, to be able to say, this is what would be our response in terms of this particular issue. So they will be properly packaged such that the departments are clear. The one thing that we had requested at the beginning and in the commissions is that we must have as clear as possible your recommendations. And looking at the recommendations from these reports, they're quite clear where each particular issue should be referred to. So the government departments, through the committees, will be responding on these issues. But it will not be a once-off event, because some of these issues require some actions to be taken, and these actions are also not once-off. They have to be implemented, looked at over a period of time. So I am sure that our committees will also give departments reasonable time to say what is the status quo with regard to a particular issue, what is the gap that has been identified, what needs to be done, what it will take to action it, and what resources as well it will take. What will then happen is that through our parliamentary staff, these issues in the committees will be tracked properly so that they don't get lost in the business of, because it's easy for things to get lost. So the idea is that they will be properly tracked as issues arising from the youth parliament, and updates over time will then be followed up by the various committees of the provincial parliament. The various updates from the committees will at some point before the end of this year and possibly going into, be consolidated into one update report. In other words, an issue will have been taken to Department X. The Department X will have provided a response, and will probably have said, we need to do this, we need to do that, and they'll be given reasonable time to respond and to also indicate what is possible within the resources, what is it that will be done, as well as what would be the plan going forward on those things that cannot be done like immediately. But the important thing is that there will be some action that will be forced through the oversight work of the committees. The idea for the provincial parliament is that 2018 youth parliament, as we convene it, the provincial parliament must be in a position to say, we had a 2017 youth parliament, these are the issues that arose, these are the things that, as a result of this gathering, have been done. So it's some kind of a report back, so that we don't start Youth Parliament 2018 as if nothing has been said here. So there will have to be some kind of update on those things that have been actioned. So some of you might be delegates next year, but there will definitely be opportunities for other people to be in 2018 Youth Parliament. Those that will be here, you will be in a position to hear what has been done on those issues that have been tabled. For yourselves, how will you know that all these things are happening. Firstly, the final consolidated report of the Provincial Youth Parliament will be published on our website once it gets ATC. So please do visit, just give it a couple of weeks. Do visit our website, and it will be clearly put out there as an active icon so that you are able to see that the consolidated report, yes, we've got the reports here, but it will be consolidated into one. Secondly, through the contact details you have provided when you registered, we will ensure as far as possible to get a copy to you either by email or other means. Our PEO, Public Education and Outreach officials, will be going out as part of their work, doing workshops throughout the province. They will also ensure that at least they put these reports, copies thereof, in the libraries in your localities. So that's one way that you'll also be able to get a copy of the report. To the extent possible, the update reports that will come much later will also be disseminated in the same way so that we keep you informed on what is happening. So generally, that is the process forward. This was not an event that starts and ends today. It started a couple of weeks, and in some cases months, with the provincial youth leadership. Today was almost the culmination of that. But going forward, it's now about we came, we saw, we said a lot of things, what then happens? So we need to cover the what then happens. And that will be the work of Parliament itself. At this point, I would like to take the opportunity to give thanks to and acknowledge a couple of people. Firstly, just to thank your parents, your guardians, who allowed you to be here today, made it possible for you to be here. And I think a round of applause to them. I think it will also be proper to thank the organizations, the schools, and the teachers that also had the faith in you and selected you to be the representative and to represent here today. And a round of applause to them as well. We wouldn't have made it without some of our partner organizations, in this case, UNASA, Project Citizen Africa Unite, and others who share the vision around youth development and have been traveling this road and will continue to travel this road with us. Your assistance is much appreciated for those organizations in particular. I would also like to say to my colleagues, the officials of the Provincial Parliament who are here today, those who are not here today but have been working in the background to make this thing possible. Colleagues, your professionalism is quite remarkable. You've made it possible for us, the youth, today to gather here. You didn't just work today. You've been working in the background before today, and I thank you for that. And for the youth that are here, for those shortcomings that you might have experienced, please forgive us for that. We will do our best every time that we have a youth parliament. But thank you very much for the colleagues. We also have our catering team, the interpreting team, and others who are service providers. We'd like to thank them for assisting us on this Saturday. Lastly, but most importantly, I thank to the wonderful people seated on the benches here, the facilitators, the discussion leaders, the speaker, and all of you individually. Thank you very much for a work that is well done. A lot of us, some of us will be traveling from here long distances. I believe and I trust that we will travel safely and that we should take all precaution to be safe. There's just a few announcements that Mr. Fendale would like to make before we then depart. On my side, I would like to thank you very much and wish you everything of the best as we depart for today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much once again to all the various organizations, the districts and so on. We've worked with you with some of you for Jezreel and the Karoo and some of the districts. We've worked with you for the past 3 years now in reaching this particular stage. So thank you very much for all the hard work and effort, particularly to my team, the Public Education and Outreach team, for taking the great risk of driving all alone out there to the furthest point of the Karoo, furthest point of Klaver and wherever else, and ensuring that the Constitution and democracy gets out to every point. So as you can see, and you've met many of the organizations now, you now have a fuller picture of all the districts and areas, and you've met the people that we interact with across the province. So thank you very much for all of your for being present here and for serving the province well in developing democracy with our youth for all the organizations. I just want to make a number of arrangements. I would like to see at least one delegate of each one of the rural delegations and the people who are in the hotel. We must have a meeting probably at about 7 o'clock, if we could have I'm not sure, maybe just immediately after this, if we could just stay behind so that we can make logistical arrangements. There are people who must travel from 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock and so on until 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon to travel to various areas. Our deepest sympathy to the Neisner community with the fires and so on. They've been reporting on direct family members and people who have been affected by the fires in the Eden district. So unfortunately, the disabled IFAD had to go because there were some logistical issues with the transport and so on. That's why you saw them leaving during the proceedings. But we want to thank patients and them for making all the effort to, and I really, really appreciate the input that they've given, very good quality input that they've always given into the processes. Thank you to all the, to you, NASA, for meeting with us, for planning with us during the week and so on. We would just like to have a photograph with the speaker, that was Lina Mandla, and the representatives that coordinated the various forums or the commissions, and then those who reported. So if we could just have a quick photograph immediately after this in front here, we will really appreciate it. It's a bit difficult to get photographs of the galleries and so on. We have a few and we'll place them on the system for yourselves, and we send them to the reports. We are attempting to make copies of the video film that was presented, and we've requested National Parliament. Melvin and myself will further that attempt. But we will definitely ensure, if we can't get it from National Parliament, we will request our IT section to make copies of it so that we can email it to, send hard copies to yourselves of that. We're going to attempt to make a summary of the audiovisual here. We've requested that be clips of the audiovisuals here of this particular event be placed on the website at least. And I would like to thank the Eden and Khamka Radio for furthering the message and the resolutions. Brendan of Eden Radio and Jezreel once again from Khamka Radio for in the Karoo districts and the Eden and those particular districts, that you will be presenting the message of democracy to our youth in those regions, and that you will continue representing the youth. For all of you as representatives of structures, as leadership structures within all the organizations. As you know, that we work in a sustainable relationship. As Mr. Nagi said, we will come back to you. We are not just going to place the reports in library somewhere. We know exactly where each one of you come from. We've met with you, we've worked with you, so you are not strangers to us. We will be communicating with you directly, but we will also make the documents available in public places in terms of the resolutions. Thank you to all the educators for all your hard work and for all the many, many tedious logistics that went into this particular process. Thank you very much to all of you. Can we just have the group for the photograph, and then I'll just want to meet with some of the rural delegates. Thanks.